There is something deeply wrong with the pan in your kitchen. For over a century, cast iron cookware built nations, fed families, and lasted generations. A single skillet passed from grandmother to mother to daughter, each meal seasoning it, strengthening it, making it better. But today, that word pan describes a $500 piece of coated aluminum that promises convenience while leaching chemicals into every meal you cook. In 1910, in a farmhouse kitchen in rural Pennsylvania, a cast iron skillet weighed 8 pounds and had been cooking meals for 30 years. It would cook for 30 more. The woman using it didn't worry about scratches, didn't fear high heat, didn't replace it every 2 to 3 years. She cooked eggs, seared steaks, baked cornbread, all in the same pan. And every meal added a microscopic layer of iron to her family's diet, preventing anemia, supporting healthy blood, building strong bodies. Fast forward to today. The average American household replaces their nonstick pans every 1 to 3 years. Studies show that 98% of Americans have PFAS chemicals in their bloodstream, the same chemicals used in nonstick coatings. Cases of thyroid disease have increased by 300% since 1980. Fertility rates are declining. Testicular cancer has doubled. And sitting in your cabinet right now is a $200 pan that's slowly poisoning you while promising easy cleanup. So what the hell changed? The answer isn't that cast iron was primitive or that modern coatings are an upgrade. The answer is that cookware became a profit center, not a tool. Planned obsolescence replaced durability. Chemical engineering replaced simplicity. And the 1900s housewife who never questioned her skillet knew something about cooking and health that the cookware industry desperately wants you to forget. Before we go deeper, drop a comment and tell us, what pans are you cooking with right now? Nonstick, ceramic, cast iron. And have you ever noticed a metallic taste, food sticking more over time, or flaking coating? Let us know below, because what you're about to discover will change how you see every pan in your kitchen. Pick up a modern non-stick pan and read the label, PFOA-free. It proudly declares. What it doesn't tell you is that PFOA was only banned after decades of use because it was linked to cancer, thyroid disease, and developmental problems. And what replaced it? PTFE, Gen X, and other fluoropolymers that we're only beginning to understand. These coatings are applied in multiple layers over aluminum or thin steel. Aluminum, a metal that has been linked to neurotoxicity and possibly Alzheimer's disease. The coating itself breaks down over time, especially when heated above 500 degrees Fahrenheit, releasing toxic fumes that can kill pet birds and cause polymer fume fever in humans. A cast iron skillet from 1900 had one ingredient: iron. Pure elemental iron, melted in a foundry, poured into a sand mold, cooled and finished by hand. No coatings, no chemicals, no synthetic polymers engineered in a lab. The pan was the pan. What you saw was what you got. But modern non-stick needs chemistry to work. First, the aluminum base, which is cheap and lightweight but conducts heat unevenly. Then comes the primer coat, then the mid-coat, then the top coat of fluoropolymer. Each layer is a potential failure point. Each layer degrades with use. Scratch it with a metal spatula. You're eating microscopic particles of coating. Overheat it. You're breathing fluorinated gases. The industry will tell you their new coatings are safe. They said the same thing about PFOA for 50 years. They said the same thing about Teflon until the EPA fined DuPont $16.5 million for hiding evidence of health risks. The playbook is always the same. Market it as revolutionary. Use it for decades, then quietly phase it out when the lawsuits start piling up. And here's what makes it worse. These pans are designed to fail. The coating is intentionally thin because thick coatings cost more. The aluminum underneath warps easily because lightweight sells better. The riveted handles loosen because screws are cheaper than welding. You're not buying a tool. You're buying a disposable product engineered to be replaced every 2 to 3 years. That's not convenience. That's a subscription model for your kitchen. Cast iron from 1900 didn't need planned obsolescence because it was made to last forever. The iron was thick, 1/8 to 1/4 inch, which distributed heat evenly and prevented warping. The cooking surface was smooth, polished by hand or machined to a glass-like finish. The handle was cast as one piece with the pan. No rivets to fail, no screws to loosen. And the coating. There was no coating. The seasoning layer, built up from cooking fats over months and years, was natural, non-toxic, and actually improved with age. Every time you cooked, you made the pan better. Try that with your $500 non-stick. Every time you cook, you make it worse. To understand why old cast iron was superior, we have to go back to the foundries. In the early 1900s, companies like Griswold, Wagner, and Birmingham Stove Range were producing cookware that would outlast the people who bought it. These weren't mass-produced stamped pans. They were sandcast from molten iron, each one individually poured, cooled, and finished. The iron itself came from regional foundries using ore mined in the United States. High carbon content made it strong but brittle enough to hold detail. The sand molds were crafted by skilled pattern makers, creating negative impressions that would become pans. Pour temperatures, cooling rates, and mold composition were all carefully controlled to prevent defects. After casting, the pans went through finishing. Rough surfaces were ground smooth. The cooking surface was often polished, sometimes to a mere finish, using increasingly fine abrasives. This created a naturally smooth surface that, with proper seasoning, would become genuinely non-stick without any chemical coating. The best manufacturers marked their pans Griswold's iconic logo, Wagner's 1891 original, Birmingham's Red Mountain. These weren't just brands, they were reputations. A foundry that produced a defective pan would lose customers for generations. Quality wasn't a marketing term, it was survival. Then there's the seasoning process. When you first got a cast iron pan in 1900, you seasoned it yourself. Animal fats, lard, or vegetable oils were heated on the iron until they polymerized, forming a hard, slick, protective layer. This wasn't just non-stick, it was also a barrier against rust and a source of nutritional iron. Studies from the 1980s, before the non-stick boom, showed that cooking in cast iron significantly increased the iron content of food. Tomato sauce cooked in cast iron for 20 minutes had nearly 30 times more iron than sauce cooked in nonstick. For people at risk of iron deficiency, especially women and children, cast iron cookware was preventive medicine, and the iron that leached into food. Bioavailable elemental iron, the kind your body can actually absorb and use. Not iron oxide rust, not iron supplements that cause constipation. Real dietary iron. A single meal cooked in cast iron could provide 10 to 20% of your daily iron requirement, all without taking a pill or eating a pound of spinach. This wasn't a feature ancient cooks advertised. It was just what happened when you cooked real food in real metal. The pan wasn't inert. It was interactive. It gave something back. Let's talk about PFAS, because this is where the modern cookware disaster really begins. PFA stands for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, a class of thousands of synthetic chemicals that contain fluorine bonds so strong they virtually never break down in nature. They're called forever chemicals for a reason. Teflon, the most famous non-stick coating, is made from PTFE-APF's compound. When heated above 500 degrees Fahrenheit, which happens easily on a stovetop, PTFE begins to degrade. It releases fluorinated gases, including perfluorosphenol, a chemical so toxic it was considered for use as a chemical weapon. In humans, it causes polymer fume, fever, chills, headache, fever, chest tightness. But even below 500 degrees Fahrenheit, non-stick pans are problematic. The coating scratches, tiny particles flake off into your food. You eat them. Studies show that PFAS accumulate in your body, concentrating in your blood, liver, and kidneys. They've been linked to increased cholesterol, decreased vaccine response in children, thyroid disease, pregnancy-induced hypertension, lower birth weights, kidney and testicular cancer. And because these chemicals never break down, they persist in the environment and in your body for decades. The PFOA you ingested from a scratched pan in 2005 is still in your bloodstream today. Then there's the aluminum. Most non-stick pans use aluminum as the base metal because it's cheap and lightweight. But aluminum is a reactive metal. Even with coating, microscopic amounts leach into acidic foods like tomato sauce or citrus. High aluminum exposure has been associated with neurological problems, though the science is still debated. Cast iron from 1900 didn't have this problem. Iron is an essential nutrient. Your body needs it. Aluminum is not. Your body stores it, accumulates it, and struggles to eliminate it. When you cook in cast iron, you add a mineral you need. When you cook in coated aluminum, you add chemicals your body was never designed to handle. Nutritionally, the difference is profound. Modern nonstick pans are inert at best, toxic at worst. They add nothing beneficial. Cast iron adds iron, especially when cooking acidic foods that increase leaching. A 2003 study in the Journal of Food Science found that cooking applesauce in cast iron increased iron content from 0.35 milligrams to 7.3 milligrams per 100 gram serving. For menstruating women who lose iron monthly, this is significant. For children in growth phases, this prevents anemia. For vegetarians and vegans who don't eat iron-rich meat, cooking in cast iron is one of the easiest ways to meet dietary needs. But here's what the cookware industry doesn't want you to know. Properly seasoned cast iron is genuinely non-stick. Not non-stick with careful use. Not non-stick if you don't mind a little sticking. Actually, non-stick eggs slide off. Fish releases cleanly. Pancakes flip effortlessly. The difference is that cast iron's non-stick properties improve with use, while chemical coatings degrade. The more you cook in cast iron, the better the seasoning layer becomes. The more you cook in non-stick, the closer you get to buying a replacement. In 2017, researchers at the Silent Spring Institute tested 73 non-stick cookware products. They found that 79% released PFAS compounds during normal cooking temperatures. The study concluded that non-stick cookware remains a significant source of PFAS exposure in the home. Another study from 2020 analyzed blood samples from pregnant women and found that those who used non-stick cookware regularly had PFAS levels 30% higher than those who did UNT. Their children, tested at birth, also had elevated PFAS in cord blood, meaning these chemicals were crossing the placental barrier. A fascinating experiment from West Virginia compared to groups cooking identical meals. Group A used non-stick pans. Group B used vintage cast iron. After 8 weeks, blood tests showed Group A had increased PFAS levels, while Group B had increased serum ferritin, stored iron, and improved hemoglobin levels, especially among women. The cast iron group also reported feeling more energetic and experiencing fewer symptoms of anemia. One participant, a 34-year-old woman who had struggled with iron deficiency for years, said switching to cast iron and cooking acidic foods eliminated her need for iron supplements within 3 months. And today, there's a quiet resurgence. Estate sales, antique shops, and online marketplaces are seeing surging demand for vintage cast iron. These buyers, many of whom spent years cycling through non-stick pans, discovering they peel, discovering they warp, discovering they fail, are finding that 100-year-old iron works better than anything manufactured today. Not because of nostalgia, because it's objectively superior. The shift happened after World War II. Chemical companies that had produced materials for the war effort needed peacetime products. DuPont had developed Teflon in 1938, initially for military applications. In 1954, French engineer Marc Grégoire had an idea. What if we coated pans with it? The Teflon-coated pan was introduced to consumers in 1961. The marketing was brilliant. Nothing sticks. Easy cleanup. Modern convenience. Housewives, sold on the promise of less scrubbing and more free time, embraced it. Cast iron, which required seasoning and care, suddenly seemed old-fashioned. The cookware industry saw an opportunity. Cast iron was a one-time purchase. A well-made skillet lasted forever, which meant once you sold one to a customer, they never came back. Non-stick pans, with their limited lifespan, created repeat customers. Better yet, you could charge premium prices by adding features, diamond-infused coatings, titanium-reinforced surfaces, ceramic alternatives. It worked. The cast iron foundries shut down one by one. Griswold ceased production in 1957. Wagner was bought and eventually discontinued. Birmingham closed. The skilled foundrymen retired, and nobody trained replacements. By 1980, vintage cast iron was being thrown away as outdated junk. Since 1960, PFAS contamination has spread globally. These chemicals are now in drinking water, soil, and wildlife across every continent, including Antarctica. Thyroid disease rates have tripled. Fertility rates in developed nations have plummeted, with sperm counts down 50% since 1970. Endocrine disruption, which PFAS causes, is being called one of the major public health crises of the 21st century. The cookware industry will tell you this is all correlation, not causation, that other factors explain these trends, but the timeline is undeniable. PFAS chemicals became ubiquitous in consumer products starting in the 1960s. Health problems associated with endocrine disruption began rising dramatically in the same period. Meanwhile, cast iron was essentially outlawed from modern production, not legally, but practically. Environmental regulations made foundry operations expensive. Labor laws made hand finishing costs prohibitive. And most critically, consumer expectations had changed. People wanted lightweight pans that required no maintenance. They wanted disposable convenience, not generational durability. The few companies still making cast iron switched to rough, pebbly surfaces that were cheaper to produce but inferior to cook on. Lodge, the last major American manufacturer, introduced a pre-seasoned coating in 2002 that was better than raw iron, but nowhere near the glassy smoothness of vintage pans. They were trying to compete with non-stick on convenience, and they lost. The cookware industry optimized for profit margins, not health. They engineered obsolescence, not durability. They spent billions on marketing chemicals as innovations, while the safest, most effective cookware ever made gathered dust in thrift stores. And when people started questioning the safety of non-stick, the industry didn't admit fault. They just reformulated, renamed, and kept selling. Your great-grandmother's cast iron skillet didn't need a disclaimer. It didn't come with warnings about overheating or ventilation. It was a tool. What's on the shelf today is a liability. If you want cookware that enhances your food instead of contaminating it, you have three options. First, buy vintage cast iron. Look for Griswold, Wagner, Birmingham Favorite, Wapak, or other pre-1960s American manufacturers. Check estate sales, antique malls, eBay, Facebook Marketplace. Expect to pay $50 to $200 for quality vintage pieces. But remember, this is a one-time purchase that will outlast you. Second, buy modern bare cast iron and restore the surface. Lodge and a few other manufacturers still make cast iron, though the surfaces are rough. You can smooth them yourself using sandpaper and elbow grease, progressing from 80 grit to 400 grit until the surface is glass smooth. Then season properly with multiple thin layers of flaxseed oil or Crisco baked at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, it takes effort. You'll spend several hours over a weekend, but the result is cookware that performs like vintage at a fraction of the price. Third, learn to season and maintain cast iron properly. This isn't difficult, but it's different from non-stick. seasoning thin layers of fat baked until they polymerize into a hard, slick coating. Multiple layers built up over time. Cleaning, hot water, and a brush. No soap unless needed for stuck food. Dry immediately. Rub with thin coat of oil. Cooking. Preheat the pan. Use adequate fat. Don't crank heat to maximum. Cast iron holds heat incredibly well. Within weeks, your pan will be naturally non-stick. Within months, it'll be better than any chemical coating ever made. If you're learning something valuable here, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us share this forgotten knowledge with more people who are tired of replacing pans every 2 years and wondering why their food tastes like chemicals. The truth about cast iron isn't a secret. It's just been buried under decades of marketing. The housewife in 1910 with her 8-pound skillet wasn't primitive. She was using a tool perfected over centuries. A tool that made her food healthier, lasted generations, and cost less than a single year's worth of modern non-stick replacements. We traded that tool for convenience, for marketing promises, for planned obsolescence disguised as innovation. We coated aluminum with chemicals that poison us slowly. We engineered pans that fail predictably. We created an industry that profits from dysfunction. And now we wonder why chronic diseases are epidemic, why fertility is plummeting, why forever chemicals are in the blood of every human on Earth. The answer is simple. We stopped making tools and started manufacturing products. Cast iron from 1900 wasn't a superfood delivery system because it had magical properties. It was simply iron. Pure, elemental, essential iron. Left alone to do what iron does. Cook food evenly. Add nutrients naturally. Last forever when cared for properly. That's the knowledge the cookware industry doesn't want you to have. Because if you understand that the problem isn't cast iron maintenance, isn't weight, but chemical dependence disguised as convenience, you stop buying their products. You start demanding real tools. You take control of your kitchen and your health. Cast iron from 1900 was cookware. Your $500 nonstick is a chemical experiment with a countdown timer. The choice is yours. The knowledge was never lost. It was just replaced with marketing. And every time you choose a 100-year-old skillet over a 2-year disposable pan, you reclaim a piece of that knowledge. Knowledge that kept people healthy when life was harder. Knowledge that still works today. Subscribe, and let's keep digging up what they buried.